Well, welcome back. We're wrapping up chapter 1 right now. We're going to talk about absolute value equations and inequalities. A little bit messy, but you've got most of the skills. All you have to do is put some of them together and you can take care of section 1.8. I trust you. So let's get started with some basic concepts. First of all, the absolute value, the distance from A to 0 on the number line. Hey, that's not too difficult. Like, what's the distance from here to Greenville? What's the distance from here to Columbia? That's the absolute value. Now, you don't see any you don't see any negative numbers there. It's always positive or 0. If you want, for example, the distance from here to Spartanburg, it's 0. So it could be 0 or a positive, never negative. So keep that in mind, and we can solve equations like that. And I'd better get my pen going, right? There we go. So you have an equation, and like this, and we can solve it, and two numbers solve that equation. If you think about it, 3 is 3 units away from 0, and -3 is also 3 units away from 0. Hey, pretty neat. Two solutions for one equation. So here's what you need. We've got 3 cases. Case 1. Absolute value of k equals k. Oops, absolute value of x equals k. Okay, if it's with an equation like this, and it's just x, then your x can be k or the opposite of k, or the negative of k, depending on how you look at it. And the solution says both of those numbers in a set. That's a pretty nice one. Second, the thing different about this one is we have a less than sign. Now, a good thing to remember on this one is that it's going to be between k and minus k. Up here it was equal to k or negative k. In this case, with the less than, it's between the two values of k and opposite of k. And it looks like this on the number line. If k is a positive number, then there's k, there's the opposite of k, and our solution set is everything between those two. If we go a little bit crazy and decide we're going to make it less than or equal to, all that means is then we'll have brackets here instead. But don't worry about that. That's real simple. So less than, you're going to be between those two numbers. Keep that in mind. If it's greater than, then it's going to be outside those numbers. So negative k, and your numbers are on the outside of that interval. So the equivalent form of setting 2 equal to absolutes is either A is equal to B if they're both positive or both negative, or A is the opposite of B, and vice versa. So let's solve this one. Notice it's an equal, so it'll be case 1. So what do we have? For that, it has to be either 12 or negative 12 inside the absolute value. So we'll write down both of them, because this number in here might have been 12, or it might have been negative 12, and then solve each equation. There's the left-hand side, just subtract 5 from both sides. On the other one, subtract 5 from both sides. It looks a little bit different, but you're doing the same process, subtracting 5. Divide by 3 in both of them, negative 3 in both of them, and there are your two solutions. Now this, especially with fractions, this could be problematic if you're trying to put negative 7/3 in where this x is. Like that. What I would suggest is, first of all, find out how to get the absolute value in your calculator. Now the calculator is just for testing whether your answers are right. All the rest of it must be done manually because I want to see the steps, and if you make small mistakes, then I can give you partial credit. So how do you check negative 7/3? That would be a difficult one for a lot of people. So you take the negative 7, divide by 3 in your calculator, or if you've got one of those calculators that has fractions, write it like that, and store it into x, and then find that absolute function and put in 5 minus 3x and see if you get 12. Then do the same thing with 17/3. Put 17/3 in for x. And then you can just bring up this again, because you've already typed it in once. Just bring it up again, you'll use the new x, and see if you get 12 again. All right, we've got an equation again, and we have two expressions in absolute value. Remember what this means. If we've got two numbers whose absolute value is the same, two chances. Either A and B are the same, or one of them is the opposite of the other one. Well, that's pretty easy. If you remember that, which you need to, then we can write those two equations. If they are the same number, there you go. If they're different numbers, then one is the opposite of the other. And then once you've got those written down, you solve the equations. Add 3 to both sides, subtract x. And you got x equals 3 and x equals negative 3/5. And double check. See what happens. Now you'll have to do this in two parts. You'll have to take this part right here, put the 3 in for the x, see what you get. Then take this one, put 3 in here, and see if you get the same answer you did on the first one. So if those give you the same answer, check. That's a good one. Next, take this, save that in x. Now since you've written these expressions on your calculator, it's easy to bring them back up. See what the 4x minus 3 in absolute values gives you, and see if you get the same result when you do it with x plus 6. Now for those of you who are a little bit on the clever side, you might look at this and say, hey, if I put my eyeballs on this one, I should get the same result if I had 4x minus 3 in absolute values minus the absolute value of x plus 6. In other words, take this expression, subtract it from both sides. And you can write all of this in one shot, see if you get 0. Then try the other solution, see if it works. And if it works, then, where am I? Then you got that one checked too. Got it? Okay, let's keep on rolling. Almost halfway. Now, we had case 1, which has two parts really. Now we have less than, an inequality. Now remember what this means. This means that you're going to be between two numbers like this. You need to find out what those two numbers are. So what do? Write the answer, write the question down correctly, double check. Now that means that this number in here is between 7 and -7. Now if you haven't written that down, that's a good thing to remember. Write that down, and that'll help you remember it the next time you see case number 2. Now we talked about this in the last section. This is an inequality, and there are 3 parts to this inequality. And whatever you do to one part of the inequality, you do to all 3. So your first shot would be subtracting 1 from both sides, or all 3 sides rather, like that. Now, because you're subtracting or adding a -1, these inequalities are going to stay in the same direction. Don't change them. Then you'll get this, -8 less than 2x less than 6. What's next? Well, if you're working an equation, you want 2x to change into an x, divide by 2. Dividing by 2, is this going to be something that reverses the inequality? No, because you're dividing by a +2. And there you go. Your final inequality, because it's less than, it's going to be between 2 numbers, and the 2 numbers are -4 and 3. There you go. It's not too bad if you remember those. So write down these tidbits and take a look at them every once in a while. Once a day at least. Take a look at them, maybe solve one problem just so you don't forget. Next, how about this one? Well, this one has a case 3. Why case 3? Because this is greater than. Now with less than, it was between 2 numbers that you found. This one is going to look like this. We have the 2 numbers, and your solution set will be split like that. So, what do? Okay, so it's less than -7, greater than +7. Well, that makes sense, right? Remember, this is going to be bigger than 7. So this would have to be bigger negative-wise than -7, and this would have to be bigger than a +7. This means on that way, and this number's in that direction. And we can solve both of those pretty easily. Now remember, it says or, because you're talking about 2 different sets. So your solution set includes those numbers. It also includes those. And the set union says throw all those numbers together into one big set. In other words, it's all the real numbers, and except for the ones in between. So let's take a look at this one. What do you think you're going to do? You want to hit the pause button and give it a shot? I dare you. So make sure you write it down correctly. What are you going to do? Well, you want the absolute value by itself, so you're going to have to add 1. There you go. And now it looks like the other one. That means that the 2 minus 7x is going to be greater than 5 or less than -5. There you go. Solve each one of those. Subtract 2 from both sides on both of them. And divide by -7. Remember, you're dividing by -7. What happens? The inequality reverses. And there you've got your 2 numbers. And the solution set you have to write separately because they don't overlap. So the first part goes from negative infinity to negative 3/7. The second part goes from 1 to positive infinity. Okay, so can you do these? Now this one has an equals thrown in. That just means that you're going to have something like this. Now you're going to have the two numbers that you find. Since there's equals there, and it's greater than, you'll have including that number and to the left, and including this number to the right. Now, what are they saying? Well, this was a trick question because the absolute value is always positive, or could be 0, so it's non-negative. Now, if this is always non-negative, let's say positive just to make it simple. If this is always positive, well, it's always going to be greater than -4. Positive numbers are greater than negative numbers all the time. And down here, what's true here? Well, you've got something that's going to end up being a positive, or 0, and this is a negative number. Well, what about this positive number? It can't be less than the -3, so what's the solution set? Got it? There aren't any. Another trick. So pay attention to these two so you don't get caught. Now you could work them out and you could still figure it out, but if you remember those two, if you want to call them tricks, then you can save yourself a lot of trouble. So how about this one? 0 on the other side. What does that mean? Well, the only way it can be 0 is if 5x plus 15 is 0. Solve that equation. Bingo. You've got your solution set. Can you write this as an absolute value? K is no less than 5 units from 8. So what is K and 8? This will give us how far K is from 8. But remember, it's always positive, and it says no less than 5 units. No less. Here's your K minus 8. And if you accidentally put it backwards, it doesn't make any difference because the absolute value is going to change it to positive anyway. So here's your equation. No less than means it can be bigger or it can be equal. So if you are confused about what to do for here, just test. Pick some numbers for K. See which ones work and which ones don't. That's an easy way to do it. So you'll get this equation or this one. It doesn't matter which one you're using. Next, write it with an inequality. N is within 0.001 units of 6. So it's within, so n minus 6, or 6 minus n if you like, is within less than or equal to. And you can write it either way, it's still good. This relates to quality control. For example, suppose you're making let's say nails, and you want them at least so long but not too long. You might want them within 0.01 inches, for example. You want someone to be able to pick up one of your nails and not notice whether it's just a tiny bit off. So they might be called 4-inch nails. You want them to be close to 4 inches. So y equals 2x plus 1. We want y to be within that. How will that be true? Subtract y from 4. You want, remember, this represents like distance or length. The distance or length is less than 0.01. This is how far it is from what you measure to 4. Is it a little bit over 4, a little bit less than 4? You want it to be within 1/100th of a whatever, inch, meter, whatever you're using. Now, they said y is equal to 2x plus 1. So you can start with this because it's easier to write, because this tells you distance from y to 4 is how far. Well, y is actually the 2x plus 1 in this case. It's just a tiny bit more complicated, but you can write like this temporarily. And then when you have this written down, then take out the y, throw it out, and put in the 2x plus 1. Simplify inside. Now you're back to a similar or something you're familiar with if you do enough work. So absolute value of 2x minus 3 less than, that means it's going to be between two numbers, and you have to figure out what the numbers are. So it'll be between negative 0.01 and positive 0.01. In other words, this would be a little bit short, this would be a little bit long. You want it somewhere between those two. And you can solve that pretty easily. We did that in the last section. And that's what you need for 2x. We don't care about that though. We need to find out what x is. How long is that nail? The nail needs to be between this and this in inches or whatever you're using. All right, well, this has been pretty nice. I'm glad you came along this long. It's almost time for the test. So go back over everything, review all those things we've talked about. We'll have a review session, and then we'll have a test. We'll see how much you really learned, okay? Relax. You should know most of this by now. Ask questions, send me an email, whatever way you can ask questions, except for one thing. If you have a question, don't text me, please, because answering via text is extremely difficult when you're using mathematics. Okay, that said, see you next time.